Hi. I'm Arabella. I stayed late, every night, fixing, organizing, cleaning up messes my sister got credit for, and the one time people were watching, she laughed and called me, just the door girl. But what if I told you the CEO had been watching every single time? They tried to erase me, quietly, like I was never supposed to exist in the room, but silence doesn't mean I didn't see, and it doesn't mean I'll stay unseen. Stick around, because this isn't just about a job, it's about the moment the quiet one finally stood up, and what happened when she stopped holding the door open. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you listening from right now? Drop it in the comments. We read everyone. The office was nearly silent, just the soft hum of vending machines in the break room and the faint, tired clack of my fingers against the keyboard. The rest of the building had emptied hours ago. Everyone had somewhere else to be. I was still here, crouched near a folding table lined with glossy bags of conference swag, slipping a pen and branded notebook into each one. The lights buzzed overhead, motion sensors flickering off and on as I moved through the room. Outside the tall windows, the Dallas skyline glowed through a gentle haze of spring humidity. I'd stayed late for the fourth night in a row prepping for the industry gala, the same one where my sister, Callista, would be the keynote speaker, the same one I helped plan from scratch, uncredited. I reached for the final stack of name cards to arrange near the entrance, each with elegant fonts and shimmering paper stock. My eyes paused on the cards. Callista Reyes, Regional Director; Jeff Yoon, VP, Marketing; Elise Tran, Media Coordinator; Liam Barnes, Strategy. Then my hand hovered over an empty slot. One name card was missing. Mine. I looked again. My chest didn't tighten. My heart didn't race. This wasn't new. There wasn't a card for Arabella Reyes, because there never was, just like there hadn't been a card last quarter, or the one before that. Instead, I sighed through my nose, slow and controlled, and finished laying the others in a neat row. I was used to being the one behind the scenes, the one who made things happen, not the one who got thanked. A quiet hum settled behind my eyes, like static. The kind that only comes when you've been awake too long and felt too little. And yet, there was something tonight. A flicker, a thread pulling tight in my chest. My hand moved on its own, reaching toward the laptop that Callista had left open, the gala slide deck, just a quick glance, just to check. I tapped the arrow key. First slide, the conference name. Second slide, Callista's name, in bold. Opening remarks, Callista Reyes, Regional Director. The next, photos and bios of the team presenting. Jeff, Elise, Liam, even Diana from admin who joined 6 months ago. No mention of me. Not as event support, not as design lead for the visuals, not as also contributed. Nothing. I sat down slowly, like my knees had forgotten how to hold me, not out of shock, not even out of pain. This was familiar. Familiar like the memory of a family dinner not long after I started at this company. I'd shared I'd been assigned to help Callista with the regional rollout. My dad had nodded and said, "Well, your sister's always had the drive. You were more of the helper type." I remembered nodding too, just to keep the peace, just to let it pass. That was months ago, maybe years. I wasn't sure anymore. I exhaled hard through my nose again, no tears, no tantrum, and turned my focus to the typos in the slides. There were always a few. A misaligned bullet, an outdated quote. I fixed them one by one. Fixing things had become second nature. I clicked save, then close. The laptop made a soft snap as I shut it. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. Callista. She entered like she always did, heels sharp, posture straight, smile preloaded. "Hey," she said, barely glancing up. "Everything look good?" I nodded. "It's done." "Great. Tomorrow just make sure you're at the front entrance early. Hand out badges, keep things moving. That's your sweet spot." She was already halfway out the door. I blinked, swallowing the words I didn't have the energy to form. "Sure." She didn't hear it. Or maybe she did and didn't care. I sat there for a moment, just looking at the blank space where my name should have been. the badge table, the sweet spot. When the door clicked shut behind her, I picked up one of the blank white cards from the leftover stack. No one else would use it. I turned it in my fingers, felt its soft matte surface. Then I took a blue pen from my tote, uncapped it, and wrote, "Support staff." I held it up, admired the uneven lettering. "Guess this one's mine," I whispered, and slipped it into the last badge holder. I finished the rest of the prep slowly, checked the tablecloth alignment, refolded the spare napkins, adjusted the lighting. Everything had to be perfect. For her. As I stood near the ballroom doors, box of labeled badges in my arms, nameless among them, I could already picture the moment tomorrow. Guests in dresses and suits flowing in, smiling at Callista, brushing past me with polite nods. They wouldn't know my name. They wouldn't need to. But for the first time, it stung. The ballroom lights bounced off every polished surface, making the whole place feel almost surreal. Gold-rimmed glasses sparkled under chandeliers, the faint scent of lilies and catered shrimp lingered in the air, and the string quartet in the corner played something classical I couldn't name, but had heard 100 times at events like this. I stood by the entrance just as I'd been asked. My black dress was understated, professional, clean, but not flashy. It wasn't the official team uniform. They were all wearing matching wine-toned gowns or navy suits. I wasn't technically part of the team, after all, just someone helping. Guests began arriving in waves, all heels and handshakes. Some nodded politely as I handed them name cards. Others barely glanced my way. A few offered me their coats as they entered, assuming I worked for the hotel. One woman with a voice like honey over ice looked me over and said, "Miss Concierge, would you let them know the hors d'oeuvres are running low?" I smiled and nodded. I didn't correct her. It wasn't worth it. From across the room, Callista approached, smiling that polished smile she always wore at events, with 2 board members flanking her, one on either side. They were laughing at something she'd said, nodding along, engaged. As they passed me, she paused for a half-second and gestured casually in my direction. "Oh, that's Arabella," she said lightly. "She's just helping out tonight. Kind of like an intern." Intern. It hit harder than I expected, not because it was false, but because it was strategic, a way to diminish without sounding cruel. I'd been helping coordinate these galas since the year she got promoted. I designed most of the signage, trained half the interns she hand-picked. "She's good at this," one of the board members commented. Callista smiled wider. "She's been doing it forever." That part at least was true. They moved on and I kept smiling like nothing happened. My face didn't crack, my hands didn't shake. I simply turned back to the next guest, welcomed them in, and handed out the next badge. An hour passed. Maybe 2. The room filled, and I became invisible again, as expected. When the entrance traffic slowed, I slipped into a quiet corner behind the check-in table and pulled out my phone. I wasn't looking for validation, just confirmation. The seating chart for tonight had been sent to staff earlier in the week, but I hadn't opened it. No need, I never had a seat. Still, I tapped the PDF and searched for my name. Nothing, not even at the back tables marked support or vendors, not even near the AV crew. I wasn't listed at all. No chair, no place. I zoomed in just to be sure, and there it was, blank space where I should have been. Dozens of names, titles, departments, affiliations, not mine. My fingers trembled, but only slightly. I returned to the ballroom just in time to hear Callista laughing near the head table. She held a champagne flute in one hand, other arm draped around Elise from communications. "Our team is the best," she said proudly. "I handpicked every one of them." I stood behind the curtain that separated the serving station from the main floor. No one noticed. No one ever did. A platter of untouched appetizers sat on a nearby tray. I picked up a cracker, dry, stale from the air, and ate it standing up. I hadn't had dinner. The orchestra struck up a livelier tune. Glasses clinked. A distant laugh rang out. Everything kept moving. I reached into my small purse and pulled out the card from earlier, the one I'd written myself. Support staff. I ran my thumb across the ink, then quietly slid it into the inside pocket of my blazer. Out of sight, out of mind. I slipped into the hallway, headed toward the restroom. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed over spotless countertops. I pushed into the far stall and locked it, sitting down slowly even though I didn't need to. "You matter," I whispered into the stale air. My voice cracked halfway through. I didn't cry. Not really. But I flushed the toilet anyway, just to drown the sound of my breath catching in my throat. Later that night, while the rest of the staff celebrated near the stage, I sat on a stool in the back kitchen. One of the caterers, a kind older woman named Denise, handed me a paper plate of leftovers. "Figured you hadn't eaten," she said gently. "You've been running around all night." I nodded and thanked her. Then I picked up the plastic fork and dug in. Quiet, tired, and unseen. But what broke me wasn't the plate. It was hearing what she said when she thought I wasn't there. I didn't sleep much that night. Not from crying. There were no tears left for that. Just silence. Heavy, cold silence that hung around my chest like damp linen. I lay in bed with my eyes open, tracing the ceiling fan's slow spins, wondering what hurt more, being invisible or realizing I'd chosen to be. 2 days later, Monday arrived like it always did. No fanfare, just the quiet slap of routine. I showed up at the office by 8:10, slightly early as usual. My desk near the back hallway hadn't moved, though it somehow felt farther from everything. The only thing that greeted me was the blue blinking light on the Keurig machine and the stale scent of microwaved oatmeal from someone's breakfast. The moment I stepped in, the hallway screen was already playing a highlight reel from the gala. I paused briefly by the printer, pretending to adjust my bag just so I could listen. The CEO's voice rang through the speakers. "You've built an incredible event, Callista. It was seamless." Then Callista, radiant in that deep wine-colored gown, laughed. "Thank you. I've had a vision since day one." A vision. Since day one. I moved on before the bile could rise. Our weekly campaign recap meeting started at 9. Callista, ever the polished leader, stood at the front of the conference room with a remote in one hand and confidence in the other. The screen behind her lit up with slides I knew too well, because I'd built them. Every box, every bullet point, every vendor contact, color-coded timelines, RSVP data dashboards, supplier comparisons, all mine. She didn't change a single font. Callista clicked through the slides, praising the interns for their flexibility and eagerness to learn. She highlighted the assistant manager for flawless coordination. Then she said, "And here's the new Q3 outreach strategy." Another click. My slide appeared. Timeline intact, the same margin errors I'd flagged but never had time to fix. No mention of me, not even a footnote. I sat in the back, next to the mini-fridge with leftover LaCroix. My name wasn't in the PDF either. One of the interns had passed around digital copies. The name on the cover page said, Callista Reyes, Senior Event Manager. When the interns clapped, I felt something in me flinch. Not snap, not shatter, just flinch. I drifted back to last month, a Tuesday night, 9:43 p.m. I was still at my desk, highlighting budget inconsistencies across 5 vendor quotes. Callista had leaned against the wall with a protein bar in one hand and said, "Just give me the highlights, I'll pitch it." So I had, every single time. Back at my desk, I opened our internal knowledge base system. I just wanted to double-check something, anything that might explain the erasure. Instead, I found silence in data form. My login credentials were gone from 5 major project records, ones I'd worked on extensively. I wasn't listed as a contributor or editor on any of them. The version history showed Callista's name and her assistants. Nothing else. I scrolled down. The folders I had organized, tagged, and maintained, all reassigned, sanitized, like I had never existed inside them at all. I stared at the screen for a full minute, watching the cursor blink in a void. So this wasn't new. This was practiced. Intentional. I thought helping meant love, that sacrificing recognition was loyalty, that letting her shine meant I still mattered. Turns out, it just meant I was easy to use. An intern walked by, clutching a tablet and a smoothie. She stopped in front of my desk, looking sheepish. "Sorry." Are you new to the team? I turned to her and smiled. Something like that? She nodded and kept walking. It was 4:27 p.m. when I gathered my things, something I hadn't done before sunset in years. Usually, I stayed behind, checking loose ends, cleaning up Callista's edits, forwarding reminders she forgot to send. Not today. Today, I clicked through the project folders one last time, then quietly forwarded the complete campaign archives, everything I had created, from spreadsheets to concept mock-ups, to my personal email, just in case. Then I logged out. No dramatic slamming of drawers, no quiet goodbye, just a walk through the hallway, the same path I'd taken 1,000 times, but this time it felt different, lighter, not hopeful, but less haunted. That night, I didn't dream of a better future. I just dreamed of finally being seen. But before I could be seen, I had to see her. Fully. It was Friday. The air inside the firm's main auditorium smelled faintly of overcooked pasta and lemon-scented polish, just like it always did when someone high up decided it was time to celebrate excellence. The gala replay luncheon had been scheduled right after noon. Mandatory, Callista had said. You were there. Might as well be part of the celebration. I didn't argue. I just nodded, tucked a notebook under my arm like I had something to contribute, and walked in 5 minutes early. Old habit. Even when I wanted to disappear, I showed up on time. The room was filled with chatter and cheap laughter. Folding chairs lined up row by row, some already occupied by junior staff in dress shirts and overcompensating smiles. My place, of course, was in the back. I sat down quietly, keeping my coat on. It wasn't cold. I just needed something to feel like armor. They dimmed the lights. On screen, the gala played again. Callista in heels that probably cost more than my rent, smiling like she was born to command attention. And maybe she was. Somewhere during the highlight reel, someone on the board, Mr. Easton, I think, asked, "Callista, how did you manage such flawless execution with such a lean team?" She laughed, full, open, charming. "Well, we had plenty of hands. Even my little sister helped out. She's basically our door girl." The room chuckled. Someone muttered, "That's cute." Another added, "You've got the whole family pitching in." Callista beamed. I didn't blink. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just stared straight ahead and gripped my pen until my knuckles went white. My breath didn't catch. It sank. The humiliation didn't scream. It settled, quietly, precisely, like a needle threading through skin. Door girl. I wasn't even a joke. I was a prop. Behind the laughter, my mind drifted. Flickers of childhood surfaced like photos soaked in vinegar, distorted, burning at the edges. The day the vase broke and I took the blame. "Be a good sister," Mom had said. "Callista can't be in trouble before the dance." Or that Christmas when the family photo arrived and I was the only one in the background, half hidden behind a poinsettia. Or every academic award ceremony where my applause was the loudest because I was clapping for her, because that's what I'd been trained to do. They rolled out a cart of desserts and decaf coffee. I didn't touch a thing, just watched from my chair, small and anchored. The CEO took the stage near the end. Applause, smiles. One of the HR leads handed him a thank you gift, a handcrafted memory box filled with mementos from the event. "From Callista and her team," they said. Inside were printed programs, mock-up plans, a fabric swatch from the event decor, sticky notes with timelines. My handwriting, my Sharpie-inked loops and arrows, margin notes about catering delays, last-minute vendor changes, neatly tucked inside the lid. No one mentioned me, not once. I stood. No one looked. I walked out of the room. No one followed. In the parking lot, beneath the muted sun of a February afternoon, I sat in my car and whispered, "I'm done." Not like a declaration, not a threat, just truth. I wasn't furious. The rage had already calcified into something else. Clarity. And it tasted like metal. That evening, I didn't go straight home. I stopped by a stationery store on the corner of Lamar and Fifth, picked up a small black notebook with gold-etched edges. Nothing fancy, just quiet, strong, something mine. At my kitchen table under a warm lamp, I opened it to the first page and wrote, "If you ever think of forgiving her, reread this." Then I stapled the name card I'd scrawled at the gala, support staff, to the top. I closed the notebook, slipped it into the bottom drawer of my desk, and locked it. Not as a goodbye, as a boundary. I thought walking away would hurt, but what hurt more was realizing no one noticed I'd left. And then came the day they finally noticed me, but not for the reason they expected. Sunday mornings in my apartment are usually slow, but that one was quieter than most. Not peaceful, quiet in that strange, heavy way grief settles in after the sharp edge dulls. I didn't check my phone, didn't brew coffee. I sat at the kitchen counter in an old college hoodie, watching sunlight crawl across the floor tiles like it had somewhere more important to be. My tote bag sat on the chair beside me. I reached in, looking for something, I wasn't even sure what, and my fingers brushed the folded name card from the gala. The corner was bent, the ink, faint now, still read, "Support Staff." I set it on the table and just stared, like it might rewrite itself, like it might finally spell my name. I opened my laptop. Subject: Formal Notice of Resignation. I typed the first 2 paragraphs without hesitation. Thank you for the opportunity. I am grateful for the experience. The usual polite armor people wear when exiting the battlefield. I began the 3rd paragraph, something about transition timelines, but my fingers hesitated. I deleted the whole thing, then rewrote it. Still, it felt wrong. The cursor blinked like it was mocking me. I closed the laptop and sat there. The silence didn't feel like rest. It felt like a decision refusing to be made. Around noon, I pulled on jeans, grabbed my keys, and drove to the coffee shop off Beltline. Not because I needed caffeine. I needed to sit somewhere that wasn't wrapped in memory. I stood in line, waiting for my iced chai, when I saw her, one of the new interns from the firm. Her name was Tasha, I think, barely 22. She was sitting at a table near the window, nervously nodding at a manager I recognized from HR, Marcy, who liked to make suggestions that were really orders. Tasha's shoulders were drawn in, her eyes darting. Her lips moved once like she was trying to respond, but then she just looked down at her tablet. I knew that look. Not fear, exactly. Something sharper. The feeling that your voice doesn't matter, so you swallow it before anyone notices it's there. I remembered being that girl. 5 years ago, I was her. The invisible helper. The quiet, reliable one. The one who smiled through small wounds because making noise never led to anything but being labeled difficult. I took my chai and walked out without sipping it. Back home, I placed the drink on the table, opened my laptop again, but this time, I didn't pull up the resignation draft. I opened a folder, the one I'd emailed myself 2 nights earlier. I stared at it for a few seconds, then right-clicked. New folder. Title: Callista, Q1 Q3 credit trace. Not out of vengeance. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. My mouse hovered over the first project file. Campaign timelines, color-coded spreadsheets, vendor quotes. I began creating a record, a clean paper trail. Who wrote what? Who contributed where? I opened metadata logs, email headers, file version histories. The proof was all there. It always had been. All I needed was the clarity to look at it for what it was. If I disappear, I murmured out loud, let it be on record what I built. I don't remember how long I worked that afternoon. Hours blurred into one another until the sun dipped behind the neighboring complex. I paused only once, when the room got too quiet, and walked to the fridge. I opened the drawer that held coupons and old magnets and found the name card again. I placed it on the upper right corner of the fridge door, just beneath a photo of my family from 12 years ago. Thanksgiving. Everyone smiling. Callista in the middle, of course. I looked at the name card, blank but for those 2 words I had scribbled at the gala. Support staff. It looked like a caption that never got written. I stepped back. No tears came. That part of me was emptied. That night, I didn't press send, but I didn't delete the file either. Because Monday morning, I walked in and the shift had already begun. The front lobby lights flickered to full brightness as I stepped through the glass doors at 7:48 a.m. 22 minutes before the workday officially began. I moved with the ease of someone who had walked that carpet 100 times before, but this time something had changed. Not the building, not the hallway. Me. I wore a fitted navy dress, nothing extravagant, just clean lines and quiet confidence. I nodded at the receptionist, offered a soft, "Good morning," and kept walking. I didn't linger near the coffee station. I didn't peek into Callista's office like I used to, out of habit. I didn't offer to help the interns set up. Kaylin, the youngest intern, looked up from her laptop as I passed. "Morning," she said, then hesitated, like she couldn't place what felt different. I just smiled. No need to explain. At 8:12, I received an internal message. Subject, drop in with O. Thorne, brief chat. I didn't panic. I didn't even blink. I stood, smoothed my dress, and walked to the executive wing. Olivia Thorne, the CEO, stood at her desk, flipping through a file. She looked up when I knocked. "Arabella, come in." I stepped inside. She gestured toward a chair, but I stayed standing. "Have you always worked in logistics?" she asked, casually, like it had just crossed her mind. I nodded. "Mostly project support, strategy flow, logistics prep." She smiled faintly. "I've been reviewing project records this week." That was it. She didn't explain what she'd found. She didn't need to. I nodded again. "Let me know if there's anything further you need." As I walked back to my desk, I didn't feel victorious. I felt rooted. By noon, I was in the back workroom alone. I opened my archive drive, slid in a USB, and began collecting. Slide decks, timeline spreadsheets, purchase orders, my metadata on everyone. I printed the originals, highlighting timestamps, tracked versions, email threads. It wasn't flashy, it was factual. By 2:30, I had compiled 5 folders. And then came Kaylin, again, standing quietly near the file cabinet. "I wasn't sure if I should say anything," she started, voice low. "But I think you deserve to know." I looked up. "When the press team asked about credits for the campaign article," she said, "Ms. Callista told us not to mention your name. She said, it'll confuse the story." She looked down. "I'm sorry, I thought it was weird." I didn't flinch. I didn't shake. "Thanks for telling me," I said. "That means something." Kaylin nodded, almost like she expected me to lash out, but I didn't. She left. I turned back to my desk, said to myself, barely above a whisper, "Okay." That word didn't mean surrender, it meant I see it, I accept it, and I'm done pretending it's fine. I updated my campaign records, color-coded names, redlined edits, annotated deletions. I printed everything in triplicate. At 4:15, I sat at my desk drafting something new. Subject, Hidden Hands in Execution, Structural Contribution Report. It wasn't an exposé, not yet. It was a quiet paper trail, backed by data, not bitterness. I saved it, didn't send it, but I did schedule a private meeting with Olivia Thorne for Friday. 30 minutes, no agenda listed. As the office began to thin out, I took a slow walk down the south corridor, the one that led to the side ballroom entrance. The same door I'd stood by through gala after gala. My shoes made soft echoes on the polished floor. I stopped in front of the door, stared at the hinges. Once I thought it was just a place to serve. Then it became a place to hide. But now it was something else. That door didn't define me. It marked where I used to disappear. Now it would mark where my name begins. The next time I held a clipboard, it wouldn't be for someone else's glory. But Callista wasn't done. She had one last card to play. It happened on a Wednesday, not even 2 full days after my quiet pivot. Word had gotten around that I had a private meeting scheduled with Olivia Thorne on Friday morning. I never announced it. I didn't need to. In places like ours, rumors move faster than memos, so when a calendar invite popped up around 10 a.m., titled Pre-Press Clarity Session, sent from Callista's office, I knew something was coming. The subject line was bland, the purpose, on the surface, innocent. "Helps everyone understand roles clearly," she had typed. "Arabella, it'd be great if you joined." I stared at the invite for a second longer than I should have, then clicked accept. The meeting was set for 11:45, a small room near the media staging suite. Coffee was already poured, pastries, warm, too rehearsed. There were 6 of us, 2 reps from the press department, 1 marketing lead, 2 interns, and Callista. I stepped in last. She greeted me like nothing had ever happened, like our childhood hadn't been rewritten one gala at a time. "I know we've had a whirlwind few weeks," she began, flashing a smile that could melt stone if you didn't know better. "Before we finalize any press angles, I just wanted to clarify team credits." She pulled out a printed email and held it up like it was sacred. "I found this from a while back," she said, unfolding it as if she'd discovered some ancient truth. Arabella actually made it very clear where she stood. Let me just read it so there's no confusion. Her voice was warm, familiar, sickly. "Happy to help behind the scenes. No need to list me. I just want to support my sister." She folded the page in half slowly, like punctuation. For a second, silence fell. Then, gasps, eyes shifting. One intern looked at me with a tilt of the head, unsure. I stared at the paper. I never wrote that. Not a single word of it. My chest tightened, not with panic, with precision. "I'd like to verify that," I said calmly. "That message doesn't sound like my writing. I'm happy to request a check of the sender metadata from IT. We log every email, especially internal ones." Callista's mouth stayed curved upward, but something behind her eyes shifted. The smallest twitch. A miscalculation. One of the press leads looked up. "We can check that easily." And then Olivia Thorne stepped into the doorway. She hadn't been invited to the meeting, but she was there. "Let's check it," Olivia said. "Might as well be sure." Callista's posture stiffened. A quiet flurry followed. Calls, screens pulled up. A tech associate joined the room within 15 minutes, tapped into the server, and pulled up the email trail. The message had been printed from Callista's assistant's account. "Did Arabella send that?" Olivia asked the assistant directly. The girl, barely out of college, froze. Her voice was a whisper. "Ms. Callista asked me to format it for the archive folder. I thought it was based on something Arabella had written, but I never saw the original. You could feel it, the energy in the room, tilting. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just turned slightly and said, 'I've submitted everything I've worked on to our shared drives. The version history is intact. You'll see my name across each file.'" Nobody said a word. Callista looked at Olivia, but the CEO was already speaking. "Arabella, can you schedule that one-on-one for Friday morning as we discussed?" "Yes," I said, "already on the calendar." Callista didn't interrupt. She just blinked and reached for her coffee, hands more careful now, as if even holding a cup required strategy. I stood, and for the first time since joining this company, I didn't feel small in her presence. I didn't feel like the door girl, or the helper, or the background sister. I felt known, even if it was just beginning. I walked out of that room without looking back, not because I was ignoring her, but because, for once, she wasn't the center anymore. She tried to bury me in silence, but I wasn't the one who disappeared. Because on Friday morning, I didn't knock. I walked in. The sun hadn't fully burned through the haze when I arrived at the building. Everything about the day felt still, like the kind of quiet right before a deep shift in the ground. No assistant greeted me outside Olivia Thorne's office, no phones ringing. Just that thin slice of glass between me and what I'd carried for too long. She stood up as I entered. No handshake, just a nod. 2 chairs, a table, her laptop, mine. "You asked to show me something," Olivia said, her voice calm but curious. I returned the nod, took my seat, and slid a small, labeled USB from my bag. There was no slideshow music, no fanfare, just a single click, and then metadata. "Everything I'm about to show you," I said softly, "was created, modified, or distributed under my name, though not always credited that way." The screen lit up with version histories. I guided her through project folders, each with color-coded dates, tracked edits, and screenshots. One slide displayed an invoice trail, vendor negotiations done via my email, yet submitted under Callista's name. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I let the documents breathe for me. Olivia's eyes scanned everything. Slowly. Then came the slideshow file from the gala. Her brows lifted slightly when she spotted it. Bottom right corner, time-stamped 2 days before the event. O. Reyes. Her hand hovered over the mouse, then stilled. "How long?" she asked. 5 years, I replied. "Maybe more, but 5 I can prove." There was no outrage in her expression, just comprehension. She folded her hands in front of her and leaned back slightly, as if recalibrating a picture she'd thought she knew. "I saved one more slide," I added. I tapped once. A new image filled the screen, the blank white name card I'd written at the gala. "Support staff," scribbled in blue ink. I reached into my folder and placed the real card on the table between us. "I used to think this was all I deserved," I said, not bitter, just honest. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was necessary. After a moment, Olivia leaned forward again, her voice clipped but clear. "I've seen enough." She clicked her pen and began writing a note, then looked back up at me. "As of today, I'm restructuring our Experience Operations Division. I'd like you to serve as Interim Strategic Experience Officer. Full review pending, but you'll have full autonomy." I blinked. Not because I was surprised. At this point, I'd given up predicting how fairness arrived. But because she added one more line. "No more door girl. Time to take your seat at the table." Something in me settled, not in victory, but in return. I breathed in deeply, maybe for the first time that entire week. "I won't be the loudest one in the room," I told her, "but I'll make sure everyone gets heard." She nodded once. Not with fanfare, just respect. The meeting ended. No applause, no staged celebration. But as I stepped into the corridor and past the glass wall I'd once stood behind, clutching name cards no one had ever read, I felt something shift. An intern looked up from her desk, startled. Her eyes flicked toward me, then back down, but she nodded, not in deference, recognition. The same door that had once held me in the margins now stood behind me. The door didn't open for me, I opened it myself. But even with a new title, some wounds don't vanish overnight. A week later, I sat at the head of my own meeting table, a clean white agenda sheet in front of me, my name printed at the top, Arabella Reyes, Strategic Experience Officer. People looked at me differently now, straighter postures, measured nods. They addressed me in full. No one called me Callista's sister anymore. The room waited for my direction. And still, something inside me felt quiet, not the same silence I used to sit in, the kind that swallowed, muffled. This one was clearer, like the quiet just before the curtain lifts. After the meeting, I took the long hallway back to my new office. On my desk was a small gray envelope. Inside, a memo from HR, a simple subject line, "Update, internal investigation, status." Callista hadn't returned to the office since the Friday fallout. The memo stated she'd been placed on administrative leave pending a full audit. No apology, no confrontation, just absence. That's how some people vanish. Not with a bang, but with a silent redirection of authority. In the hallways, I'd started noticing the shift. Some folks avoided eye contact. Others tried too hard to offer kindness in the break room. A few stopped me awkwardly, saying things like, "I had no idea," or "I hope you're okay." I'd nod. But I never said, "It's okay." Because it wasn't. At home that evening, I opened the fridge for milk and paused. That photo was still there, me and Callista at a school fair. I was maybe 9, holding cotton candy and standing behind her while she smiled, center frame, with a trophy in hand. I stared at it for a while. Not with sadness, really, just recognition. Then I gently took it down and slid it into the drawer beside my sink. Not to forget. Just to stop looking at it every time I reached for something real. The next morning, I came into the office early. A small brown box sat waiting on my desk. No name on the outside, just the company seal. Inside, a fresh stack of company name cards. They were heavier than I remembered. Ivory cardstock, matte finish, my name in dark gray serif font, no titles, no labels, just Arabella Reyes. That was enough. I placed one in my purse, not for handing out, just to carry. For me. Later that afternoon, as the sun poured across the rooftop terrace during the departmental luncheon, a familiar face approached. Kaylin, the intern from earlier weeks, stood holding 2 cups of coffee, unsure. "I didn't know if you still liked hazelnut," she said. "You never said." "I do," I answered, accepting the cup. She glanced down, then back up with surprising steadiness. "You're the reason I stayed," she said. "I saw you, even when no one else did." I smiled, not wide, but warm. "Then you keep showing up, for the ones no one sees." We stood there for a while, letting the breeze do the talking. At sunset, I returned to my office, alone again, but not lonely. I opened my desk drawer. The original name card was still there, support staff, scrawled in blue pen on a torn blank. I placed it beside the new one, different fonts, different weights, both mine, both deserved a place. "I used to think being quiet was safe," I said under my breath, as if explaining to the air what had taken me years to say out loud. But silence doesn't always mean safety. Sometimes it means disappearing, and I've disappeared enough for one lifetime. I closed the drawer. No loud music, no applause, just me, and my name on the card. You don't need to be loud to lead, but you do need to believe you belong.